Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, my name is Laura and I'm a PhD student of comparative literature in Germany, and this is my series on fantasy and science fiction classics, episode number 2 on the Odyssey by Homer. I hope you enjoy the video. First, I quickly want to introduce the video chapters to you. So at first I want to talk about the question of authorship, or also called the Homeric Question, which deals with the question whether Homer even existed and even wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad all by himself. And then I quickly want to summarize the story to you so that you know what I'm talking about. Then I want to talk about some of the most interesting mythical creatures that appear in the Odyssey, especially in the books 9 to 12, what they represent and how they are depicted, and also show you some pictures of how people imagine the creatures to look like, because I think that's really interesting. And afterwards I also quickly want to talk about the question whether Odysseus can be seen as some kind of a modern hero, even the first modern hero of world literature, a question which has been discussed in literature and philosophy as well. And in the end, I just want to talk about some of the most common themes in the story, and also just give you my impression of why I think the story is still important today and what it can teach us and what we can get out of it. I hope you enjoy the video and stay till the end. So at first I want to talk about the so-called Homeric Question, which revolves around the authorship and composition of the ancient Greek epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which were attributed to Homer. And the debate goes around the question whether a single poet named Homer actually composed both works, or if multiple poets contributed to their creation over time. So the question also explores the oral tradition's role and the potential influence of later editors on the poem. So what we know is that there's been a very influential oral tradition of reciting verses and stories in verse form, and also probably the Iliad and the Odyssey in like an earlier form or something. But we don't know whether there has been like one single person who actually sat down and wrote all these verses down and composed like a unified work for both Iliad and Odyssey. And we don't know whether there's been influences by other poets, or whether there's been like a group of poems or like poets, or whether there's been several people coming together to compose these works. And I think it's not easy or even possible to answer that question once and for all. I would love to discuss the question more with a scholar who's an expert in that field at some other time, but for this video and for now, just keep in mind that the question whether Homer as a person existed, and also as a person who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, is doubtful. There's many different approaches to that, and it's just important to keep in mind that that question is not finally answered yet, or not even finally answered ever. So that's important, I think. Now I quickly want to summarize the plot, and at first I just want to read the summary given by Aristotle in the Poetics, because I found that really concise and beautiful. It's from the chapter 17 in 1455b. I will also put it on the screen, I think. It goes like this. A certain man is absent from home for many years. He is jealously watched by Poseidon and left desolate. Meanwhile his home is in a wretched plight. Suitors are wasting his substance and plotting against his son. At length, tempest-tossed, he himself arrives. He makes certain persons acquainted with him. He attacks the suitors with his own hand, and is himself preserved while he destroys them. This is the essence of the plot. The rest is episode. So this is a very, very quick summary, I think, but it really says, like, tells you the essence of the story. I still want to go a little bit deeper into that, because otherwise I think it's not really easy to understand what's going on. But I think it's really interesting that Aristotle doesn't even say the name of Odysseus, he just says a certain man, and these things happen to a certain man. Just keep that in mind. So we've got 24 books, or in German it's called Gesänge, and they have been composed, I think, in accordance to the Greek alphabet, which has 24 letters, but I think that has been attributed later. And the most important part are the books 9 to 12, in which Odysseus tells his story of his travel home and what's been happening to him and his crew on the ship, and where they went, what kinds of encounters they had with different creatures and people and folks. But in the first 4 books, Odysseus isn't even introduced personally. At first we have the consultations of Zeus and the other gods on the Olymp, because we've got the situation that Odysseus, who has been one of the heroes of the Trojan War with the Greeks, he wanted to get home after the Trojan War ended, and he was traveling with his companions, and then many things happened, and he came finally to the so-called island of Ogygia, where the nymph Calypso lives, and Calypso fell in love so deeply with Odysseus that she held him captive, and she's been living with him ever since. But she wasn't willing to release him to get back to Ithaca, where he's from, and to get back to Penelope, his wife, to Telemachus, his son, and all his home, actually, where he longed to go all the time. So that's why Athena, who has always been protecting Odysseus and who's been wishing to support him, he's like one of her proteges in a way. She asks Zeus to release Odysseus, and Zeus finally sends Hermes to order Calypso to let Odysseus go. And then in book 2 we meet Telemachus, Odysseus' son, who embarks on a journey to find news of his father, who has been missing for so many years already. Just the Trojan War has been going on for, I think, around 10 years, and then he's also been held captive by Calypso for around 10 years, so we're almost 20 years after Odysseus and the Greeks went to Troy to fight the Trojans. So Telemachus was even just a small boy when Odysseus left, so he doesn't really know about his father so much, but Athena meets him and she tells him, please get a ship and a crew and head out and try to find information about what has happened to your father, which he does after that. And then in book 3 and 4 we hear about Telemachus' travels. He first travels to Pylos, where he meets Nestor, a wise old king who fought with Odysseus at Troy. And Nestor provides some information about the Greek heroes and suggests that Telemachus visits King Menelaus in Sparta. In book 4, Telemachus arrives in Sparta and he meets Menelaus and Helen. And Menelaus recounts his adventures and provides more information about Odysseus, but says he doesn't know where he is. And in the same time, the suitors of Penelope, of Odysseus' wife, they plot murder of Telemachus, because all of them want to gain the wealth and also become the husband of Penelope, so that they can take Odysseus' place, which is not okay at all. They behave horribly, and everyone wants them to just get rid of them and to leave, but they can't really do much about it. So that's important to keep in mind. In book number 5, after the gods have decided to release Odysseus, Hermes goes to Calypso and tells her to release Odysseus, which she agrees to because she has to, and it's been like an order from Zeus, and you wouldn't just ignore an order from Zeus. And after that, Odysseus is very happy and he builds a ship and set sail. But Poseidon, who's very angry at Odysseus, and you will learn about why a little later, he sends a storm so that wrecks the raft. And in book 6, Odysseus is washed ashore on the island of the Phaeacians, I think they are called. And the princess Nausicaa finds him and helps him to get to the palace of the Phaeacians. And there he's welcomed by the king Alcinous and the queen Arete. And they are very welcoming, very friendly, and they ask him about what has happened to him and ask him to tell his story. And after that, they host a game in book 7. The Phaeacians host a game in honor of Odysseus, and everything's very happy. And there's a song of a bard. He sings about the Trojan War, and he triggers very strong emotions in Odysseus. And that's when he really asks him to continue telling his story. And in books 9 to 12, that's when all the story actually happens. And I want to go into detail on the mythical creatures a little later. Just for now, at first I want to tell you what happens to Odysseus and his crew. So he tells us that when they were setting out to travel home after the Trojan War, they met many different people. They went to the island of the so-called lotus eaters, and this was like a folks at a small island where the people were eating lotus, and they were also giving the crew of Odysseus some lotus, and they were falling like into becoming unconscious and even apathic. So Odysseus had to take them back to the ship and made them fasting, because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten back to normal ever. So that's why they wanted to leave quickly, but luckily nobody died. Then they also meet a Cyclops, which is like a big giant with only one eye. Then they also meet Circe, an enchantress and a minor goddess, who turns some of the crew members into pigs, and Odysseus has to make her turn them back into people. They also meet the Sirens, some mythical women creatures who want to tempt the people traveling by and to destroy them. They also meet Scylla and Charybdis, and I will tell about them later. They are both like sea monsters. And Odysseus even visits the underworld to meet the blind prophet Tiresias, who can tell him more about how to get home. And there's many things going on. I won't go into detail too much, because I think probably you know the story or have heard about it before, because I think it's very popular, and also because I want to talk about those mythical creatures a little bit more, because I think that's most interesting to me, at least. And then just a quick summary of the ending in books 13 to 24. So like the major part, or just at least half of the whole story, is about the return of Odysseus to Ithaca. And so after he's been at the Phaeacians, he's provided a ship and food and everything that he needs to travel back to Ithaca, to his own island. And this is where he gets to very easily, luckily. So after all those storms and interactions and meetings with like the monsters and losing all of his crew in the meantime, finally he makes it home rather safely, and by the help of Athena he actually manages even to get everything back that he wanted. So he meets his son in the looking like a beggar, because Athena makes him look like that, so he's in a disguise and not everyone recognizes him so quickly. And he just tells Telemachus that he's his father and he's returned, and they try to make a plan how to reclaim the whole court and the whole island, because Odysseus has to put an end to all those suitors of Penelope and to just put order and peace back into place. So he makes up a plan with Telemachus, and Penelope decides that finally she wants to decide for a suitor, and she asks all of the suitors, she wants to decide for a husband, and she would take the person who is able to shoot with the bow of Odysseus, and nobody of the suitors is actually able, apart from the beggar, who is actually Odysseus. And after a private encounter between Penelope and Odysseus, she realizes that he's actually her husband, and he really returned home, and they are very happy. And after that, in a very bloody killing, they kill all of the suitors. I think it's even more than 100. So after that, Odysseus can restore peace and order in Ithaca, and the family is reunited and happy. So for them it's a happy end, not for the suitors at all, but there's been so much happening, so I think in a way they deserve this ending. So that's so much for the plot. Now I want to talk about the different creatures. So first we got the Cyclops Polyphemos, I think he's called, Polyphem. He's described as a one-eyed Cyclops, a giant with immense strength, and he is the son of Poseidon, the god of the sea, and this is also why Poseidon is so angry with Odysseus when he kills Polyphem. And they encounter him on an island where the Cyclops tends his flock of sheep, and they want to discover what's going on that island. And when they meet Polyphem, at first he seems rather friendly and lures them into his cave, but instead of serving them as one would expect of a friendly person, he eats some of Odysseus' men alive and raw. So that's really horrible. And after that, Odysseus plans plotting against Polyphem so that he gets a revenge for the friends he has lost from his crew. And he managed actually, with the help of some of his friends, Odysseus manages to make Polyphem drunk, and when he's drunk, they stab him in the eye. And after that, Polyphem wakes up and he's like, "What's going on? Who did that to me?" And Odysseus says, "I'm nobody." And then he cries out, "Nobody hurt me," and something like that. And finally, when Odysseus and his men manage to get back to the ship and travel away, Odysseus cries out loud, "If someone asks you who has done that to you, I'm Odysseus." And this is why Poseidon also knows about what's been going on, so that Odysseus was the one who hurt his son. And actually he just fulfilled like a prophecy given from an oracle. And even Polyphem knew about that. He knew that some men called Odysseus would come by and stab him in the eye one day. But I think it's very interesting to see that the consequences of the depiction of this rather mythical creature that Polyphem is, and the story shows about the consequences of Odysseus' actions. So especially his hybris, because he doesn't care about the fact that he's the son of Poseidon, and his cunning. He's very versatile, and he's witty, and he knows how to make Polyphem get back to his own cave and pay for his own actions. But it also shows that Odysseus is actually able and intelligent enough to escape all the situation, and he's also able later to deal with everything that's going on. So now we've got the Sirens. They are enchanting mythical creatures, and the upper bodies are of beautiful women, the lower bodies I think of birds actually. They possess irresistible seductive voices that can lure sailors on to their doom. And they reside on an island in the sea. And when the sailors hear the songs, they are drawn towards them, which leads to shipwreck, so the people die. And as Odysseus is warned about the dangers posed by the Sirens before by Circe, I think, he orders his men to plug their ears with beeswax to resist the Sirens' song. But Odysseus is very eager to hear the song himself. So he makes his men tie him to the ship so that he cannot get to the Sirens, although he really longs to. So nothing can happen to him. So this actually symbolizes temptation, I think. The temptations and the distractions that these beautiful creatures can provide, but also that the whole crew encounters several times. There's so many temptations, like good food, beautiful women, for example, or just, wealth, everything that people would feel drawn to. And here, this is also another test for Odysseus and his crew to deal with the whole situation. And because they've been getting the help before, they can provide for the whole situation, and they can be proactive in their handling of that, so nothing really can happen to them. And now my favorite two mythical creatures, Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla is described as a multi-headed sea monster with 12 legs and 6 heads, each head having 3 rows of sharp teeth, so really horrible. I think in the upper part she's more like a woman as well, and in the lower part it's more like dogs or something. But the exact appearance is not really given so directly. So I've got some pictures I want to show you as I've done before, so you can just imagine yourself. She dwells in a narrow strait opposite to the so-called Charybdis, who was like a whirlpool, but I will talk about her in a minute. And ships passing through this strait have to navigate between the two perils, like between Scylla and Charybdis, and both are very dangerous. So, but they are warned about that as well, but from Circe. So, when Odysseus and his crew come, they must decide whether they want to face Scylla or face Charybdis. And now I'll talk about Charybdis before I talk about both of them. So Charybdis is like a massive whirlpool or like a sea monster that actually swallows and regurgitates huge amounts of water 3 times a day. So she basically just swallows all the water in the sea, and then after some time she just regurgitates it all out again. So they have to be very careful that their ship doesn't get sucked in by Charybdis and later maybe exposed again. I think that's really funny, just imagining that kind of a sea monster, that the worst thing that could happen was just being swallowed by her, right? So Odysseus' strategy here is to face Scylla rather than risk the entire ship being sucked into Charybdis. And Scylla eats 6 of the men during the passage, but the rest of the crew survives the encounter. So whenever they are meeting a new creature, a new a monster or something, Odysseus always has to sacrifice some of his men in a way. So otherwise they probably wouldn't get further ahead in the story or in their journey as well. But Scylla and Charybdis, I think they symbolize the dangerous and unpredictable nature of the sea, as we have also seen at other encounters with storms, for example, sent by Poseidon, who is very angry with Odysseus, as I said before. But here we've got like the sea monsters. They are just very interesting. The stories of Scylla and Charybdis themselves are also very interesting. Maybe I'll talk about them in another video as well. Here it's also like showing that Odysseus is able to navigate that situation and to show that he's very much able to persevere, although they are facing so many hardships. That's very strong, I think. And now I want to talk about the question whether Odysseus can be seen as something like a modern hero, or even the first modern hero. And I stumbled upon this question in a lecture by Susan Neiman, who is working at the so-called Einstein Forum in Berlin. And she's a philosopher who's been drawing in her lecture on an idea by Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, who have been writing in their book The Dialectics of Enlightenment, or in German Die Dialektik der Aufklärung, a chapter about the Odyssey. But I don't want to get too much into detail, but what Susan Neiman took from that was the idea that Odysseus represents some kind of a modern hero who even like who stands for himself and who fights for himself. I mean, he accepts the help from the gods, but he's still very much fighting for himself. And Susan Neiman added to that he decides to he chooses the mortality over the immortality, because he really wants to be reunited with Penelope, with his wife, and to just live like the life he's been given as a mortal, as a human being, and to just live that kind of a humble life with all its ups and downs, and maybe even dangers and all the problems that you could face, like injuries or illnesses and sadness, for example, everything like that. So that's very interesting, I think, because especially if you contrast Odysseus and that idea with Gilgamesh, who I've been talking about in my last video, if you remember. Gilgamesh wanted to become immortal because he was he feared that when he died that everything was over, and as he's seen that his best friend Enkidu died and he couldn't do anything about it, so he didn't have any power, anything to change that whole situation. He wanted to become immortal, to overcome this mortality, overcome this human condition in a way. But at the same time, he's so very human-like in the way that he acts, and I think Odysseus is very different from him in the way he approaches this whole thing. Also, the interaction between gods and humans is a little different, I think. I mean, in both cases, Odysseus accepts the help of the gods, because otherwise he would have probably died already very soon after, or even during the Trojan War, where the gods even interacted with the fighting and even chose sides. Whilst in the Odyssey they are more of the wise people who give advice to Odysseus and to his crew and say, please do this and don't do that, otherwise you will die, you will be punished, whatever. I mean, they also seek revenge, such as Poseidon, but the situation is a little different than in Gilgamesh, I think. But as you can see, that Odysseus is more he's got more the qualities of a hero that we would connect with him, I think, because Gilgamesh, until the very end of the story, he's fighting more or less for himself. He's got only his own interest at heart, and he only wants to survive himself. He wants to become immortal just for himself, so that he can be that and just live for himself and I think Odysseus always has his crew, his family. He's got so many other people in mind, actually. And he also has like a sense of friendship and of community. And that's different, I think. And I just wanted to talk about an account of Eric Auerbach, who has been a literary scholar, who wrote the wonderful book Mimesis. I can recommend that completely. I've enjoyed reading that very much. And there's a chapter that's called Odysseus' Scar, or the Scar of Odysseus, in which Auerbach argues that the portrayal of Odysseus in the Odyssey represents a shift towards a more complex and psychologically nuanced characterization, akin to the modern novel, actually. So he suggests that the narrative style and psychological depth found in Odysseus' character in the Odyssey stands in contrast to the more straightforward, heroic figure of earlier epic literature. Odysseus, with his flaws, internal conflicts, and intricate experiences, is seen by Auerbach as a precursor to the modern, psychologically complex characters found in modern literature. So I think that's a very important aspect, and I think that's more important than the idea that Odysseus like sacrifices himself for others, or that he wants to actually choose immortality over immortality, because there's quite a psychological depth in his character, and I think that's probably also what one could refer to when saying that he's like a modern hero. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because my idea was also that, isn't it a little bit difficult to take these very modern concepts, like even the concept of modernity is a very, like an idea that just came up within the last 100 or 150 years. So, yeah, I think one would have to dissect that a little better to really be able to give an answer to that question. Could Odysseus be seen as like a modern hero, especially because we don't really know about so many tales that were told before the Odyssey even appeared, like in 800 BC, so before we don't really have many accounts of literature. So it's difficult to say that Odysseus represents some completely new type of heroic figure. That's what I think. But if you see that differently, or if you have a completely different idea or perspective on that, please leave a comment down below so we can discuss that further. I haven't read or thought about that extensively, just I thought that it was quite an interesting idea. And I will also link below the lecture with Susan Neiman, because I really enjoyed that one, and she's also giving a very funny summary of the whole plot. So yeah, what can we take from the epic? I think we can take a lot from it. It's at first a wonderful adventure story. It's especially the books 9 to 12 are really worth a read, but also all the rest, although the rest is really told in very much detail, and if you're not in the right mood to read that, maybe read it at some time when you really feel relaxed and ready to dive deeper into all the struggles that Odysseus faces, and also especially after the return to Ithaca, where not so much happens, but then also enough so that it doesn't really get boring. But that's really nice. So the adventure part and the heroic part, the mythical creatures he encounters, that's really wonderful. All of that is very beautifully told. The dactylic hexameter is also very beautiful. I have read a German translation by Johann Heinrich Voss. It's like one of the most famous German translations published in the 19th century, and there's modern accounts as well. There's also prosaic forms in English probably too. So if you're interested in reading the Odyssey and haven't done so yet, I would recommend just looking for a translation that suits your style of reading or your interest. So maybe you're more looking for like the story rather than the typical style, or maybe you're looking more for like a version that's like closer to the original. So in this case I would try to find maybe an older translation, or maybe a translation that tries to get closer to the original text. So that's really something that I would recommend. Other than that, I also think all the themes that are discussed in the epic or suggested to discuss or to think about are very beautifully executed. You've got themes such as the idea of homecoming, because that's such a strong idea. It's more than just traveling around without a purpose or something, or without a end. Actually, it's so much more about the homecoming. So I think actually the whole, when we say that this or that has been like an Odyssey, we always refer to purposeless wandering around, but actually it refers in the Odyssey so much more to the homecoming aspect, because from the beginning on, Odysseus just wants to get home, and like more than half of the Odyssey just tells about his homecoming, so about his return to Ithaca and his return to his family, his stay in Ithaca. And just there's this tiny part from chapters 9 to 12 actually, which just really tells about his journey, his real journey, traveling around and having all these adventures. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's something you could think about a lot more. Then there's also just the idea of wandering around, all the encounters he has, the virtue of friendship and also hospitality, because most of the people that Odysseus and his crew encounter are very hospitable. They are very friendly. They serve good food and wine and drinks, and they preserve them with so much kindness and understanding also, especially when he's at the Phaeacians with King Alcinous and his daughter Nausicaa. That's really wonderful, I think, and it makes you believe in human beings again, I think, when you read about that. And even when he meets some of the other creatures, like for example also when he meets Circe or he meets Calypso, they are not evil. Like they have their own interests, but they are also willing to help. And even the gods, I mean, some of them are revengeful, but most of them are actually also just willing to help, as long as Odysseus and his crew behave well. And as most of his crew members don't behave well, they have to die. So that's quite a lesson. I think you also got like the idea of like heroic virtues such as loyalty, perseverance, and the values of leadership, and so many other things and aspects that make the story really timeless and really worth a read. So just talking about this whole human condition, what does it mean to be human and to experience all these typical human things. That's what the Odyssey does very well. I haven't gotten around to read the Iliad yet. I will do that soon, I think. Tell me if you've read it, if you prefer the Iliad over the Odyssey or the Odyssey over the Iliad, or if you prefer some other story even more. Tell me what you like about the Odyssey, whether you've got some questions that you would like me to answer, or maybe an expert to answer, or whether there's something else you want to tell me or just tell others in the comments. I think it's some kind of work that could be discussed over and over again. Tell me which one of the depictions of the mythical creatures you like the most. I will also reference all the sources below that I've been using for the video, of course. Thanks to all the ones that put their creativity into creating these works. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel so that it grows and other people can see the videos too. that would mean a lot to me. And also just hit like or the video if you want to, and if you enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun for me to create that one. So see you in my next video, and bye bye.